Alright, I'm gonna give this a whirl and see how it works, everyone. My name is Risa Anderson, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about an issue that is often overlooked, and my goal here is to just shine a little bit of a light on it for you guys so that we can see that this is a prominent issue. So just a little bit of background about the issue. It is vacancy and abandoned buildings in suburban towns and communities, areas like that. This is, when I talk about the harms, causes, and potential plans to combat this issue, it is not simply for my area in specifics, but more for a broad overview. This is a problem that's happened in the past, it's happening right now, and will happen in the future, not only in my community, but in many other communities as well. Specifically speaking on my community, I am talking about the area that I reside in, and that is Coon Rapids, Minnesota. It's a town that runs on a little bit on the smaller side. It's about 60,000 people population. And for the sake of my argument, I will talk about how it's separated into two distinct places often, and it's separated by a railroad track. And on one side of the city, it's a little bit of an older generation that lives there in the residential area, and it has a few strip malls that are pretty run down, and those are the buildings that are often most vacant. On the other side of town, it's more booming population-wise. A lot of newer families, a lot of new residential areas are being built, and that is where we have our outdoor mall. It is Riverdale Outdoor Mall. So that strip mall is usually pretty good on staying full, but there are also a few vacant buildings on that side, so I don't want you to think it's completely on one side of the city. It is a problem that both sides are having. And with Coon Rapids, this is a problem and affects our community because the area that we're in, it's kind of around Fridley, Blaine, Andover, Anoka, is very up and coming. There's a lot of younger families, a lot of destinations that are drawing potential customers in. We have the Schwann's Ice Arena. Anoka has multiple parades every year that bring people in. Andover is becoming a huge residential area. So it's important, and this kind of goes with the urgency aspect of the issue, that yes, it has been a problem in the past. May it be a problem in the future? Maybe, probably, we don't know. But for right now, it's urgent that we can get it under control and manageable, so that moving forward in the future, it's not this huge problem laying on the generations that are behind us. So when I talk about it affecting both sides of the community, that affects our community wholeness, but it also impacts residents that live there, with not as many people coming through, not being a very booming town, and it also affects potential and current business owners. So that means businesses are moving out of town, businesses that might be looking to move into town are deterred because of this, and that's not fair to people that are already living there. That deters their community, and also potential homeowners and buyers that are looking to move to the area are often kind of not as into the area because of the problem. So like I said, it does happen in multiple other cities, and basically from here on out, what I'm about to say can go for any of the other communities as well, but I'm specifically focusing on the community of Coon Rapids, Minnesota. So now I'll go into a little bit of the causes and why this issue is happening, and then I will touch on the harms, on why this issue is even an issue, and what it's doing to our community. And then I'll tie it up with a little bit of an action step for what we can do going forward. So the main causes are that the bigger and better mentality that often Americans are joked at for having, but it really is a problem in this issue. Bigger and better and low motivation to just upgrade what we already have existing in place is a huge issue when it comes to vacancy and abandoned buildings. They're businesses that already own a building. If it's starting to get run down or older or not in the best location, instead of building up around it or updating or renovating inside, instead they will sell their existing location or stop paying rent there to move to a new building that they build or newer buildings that have recently been built, instead of renovating, having another business come into their existing building, or even tearing down buildings that aren't being used. I'm not saying that we need to build our whole community up into this big commercial buildings everywhere on every street corner, so maybe tearing down even is an option. But one of the main causes is that people aren't looking for other options, instead they're just going bigger, better. But really, there are no incentives coming from the city, consumers, anything for them not to have the bigger and better mentality. So that's a really big cause, and that's one that we really need to tackle. Another cause is the crime rates and prospective businesses' intentions. With the crime rates in Coon Rapids, and I will add, when I spoke to Brad Wise in a personal interview, he is the police chief of Coon Rapids, Minnesota. He touched on the issue of how crime rates do spike up in areas of low population and vacant buildings, abandoned buildings, and I'll talk about this more in harms, but this comes in with the safety and loitering aspect as well. So with these crime rates in these areas, prospective businesses have no incentive there to move into these areas because that slows down their sales. And businesses that are already in that area want to get out because of that, but they're not understanding the full cycle that these crime rates are happening because of vacancy. And that kind of ties into the third major cause that I have for you today, and that is rent prices and versus consumption and sales, and how the business itself is doing. When rent prices from the landlords are spiked up so high, businesses can't keep up sales-wise, so often they have to foreclose, abandon, or simply move out when they know they won't be able to pay next. And when I spoke to Matt Brown, he's the development specialist in Coon Rapids, we touched on, there's one building right on Coon Rapids Boulevard in a pretty populated area that has been 4 restaurants in the past 6 months. So I reached out to Diggity, the owner of Diggity, that was the last restaurant that I was, and kind of asked him in an email why these things were happening and why did he think his business failed to work there and other businesses before him. And he did say that rent prices were just too high for the sales he was getting, and he couldn't find anybody that wanted to move in there next because all the previous building owners had the same problem. And it was just a bad cycle that kept on moving, and without the rent prices being lowered, no one could keep up there. But now, looking back for the landlord, is that really in their best intentions to do that, because now it's abandoned and vacant and no one is living there or paying rent prices. So those are kind of the 3 main causes that there are in respect to the vacancy issue. Now I'm going to move into 3 main harms and kind of why this issue is the issue that it is. So the first one, I'm going to go back to the community wholeness. It's kind of now splitting into 2 cities, and Coon Rapids really doesn't want that. It will turn into one bad side of the city and one good side of the city. And with the railroad tracks being down the middle, it doesn't really help that. But closing the gap there and making more community wholeness is something that will really benefit all members of the community. The second major harm is safety and loitering. And I'll touch back on my interview with Brad Wise. He did say that around vacant buildings and abandoned buildings is where kids tend to loiter. And although he could not give me any specifics on this, there are a few gang-related activity that has been reported and suspected in the past year, and it all has happened on areas where there are not video cameras present, business owners, customers around on these buildings because they're abandoned and left vacant. This also comes into safety with what are these kids doing drug-wise. Gang-related activity can lead to violence, but also on the other side of safety, we are talking about water damage, mold, things from inside the building that aren't being upkept because there are so many vacant buildings that they can't really keep up with all of it. And the third harm I have is a little bit less of a problem, but still very present, and it's beautification and making our community more welcoming. With these abandoned buildings and the loitering comes graffiti, just the vacant buildings themselves. They have weeds on the outside, signs are falling off the buildings, nothing's really being upkept, and that's because they are left vacant with no owner or management to really care for them. And that doesn't really make our community seem welcoming or ready to have more businesses in the area. So with those harms, you can tell that this issue is very prevalent and needs to be taken care of right away. When the causes are pointed out, it seems like there are multiple clear plans in action, and with the new business program, which many cities that have had this problem and seen this issue happen in their cities before have adopted, and that includes providing incentives, providing punishments for those who don't go with the incentive way, different things like that. And that's what, going forward, we're going to try to put into action something along the lines of the new business program. Not to get too far into plan, but that is on the next step. So, but once these are all brought to attention, everyone can agree that it's a problem. And this is when our clocks start working for what's going to be next in the plan step. So thank you all for your time today. I'd love to give you an update on plan in the near future.